The sun was barely up when Catherine pulled into the parking lot at Camp Pendleton. She sat in her car for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, watching other vehicles arrive. Some carried young recruits who looked like they'd just graduated high school. Others held seasoned personnel heading to their offices. She took a deep breath and grabbed her duffel bag from the back seat. At 28, Catherine knew she was older than most people starting out here. While others had joined right after high school, she'd spent nearly a decade working as a paramedic in Los Angeles. She'd seen things that would make most people quit after a week: gang violence, car accidents, overdoses. She'd held pressure on wounds while speeding through red lights, talked people through their worst moments, and made split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. But something had been missing. Every time she'd treated a veteran, every time she'd heard their stories, she felt a pull toward something bigger. Her grandfather had been a Marine. Her uncle, too. They'd never pushed her toward military service, but their quiet strength had always inspired her. So one night after a particularly rough shift, she'd made the decision. She was going to serve. Now here she was, orders in hand, ready to prove herself all over again. The admin building was busy with people moving in different directions. Catherine found the right office and handed over her paperwork. The clerk barely looked at her, just stamped a few forms and pointed her toward the barracks where she'd be staying. No welcome, no orientation, just business as usual. She found Delta Company gathered outside for morning formation. About 30 Marines stood in loose rows, most of them looking fresh-faced and eager. The training instructor, a man named Sergeant Collins, had the kind of voice that could probably be heard from a mile away. He was built like a tank and had eyes that seemed to see right through people. When Catherine joined the formation, a few heads turned. One guy elbowed his buddy and smirked. Another just looked her up and down before turning away. She'd expected this. Being a woman in spaces dominated by men wasn't new to her. The fire department had been the same way. The emergency rooms she'd worked in had their share of doctors who thought paramedics, especially female ones, were just there to drive the ambulance. Sergeant Collins called out names, assigning people to their units and barracks. When he got to Catherine, he barely paused. "Mitchell, Delta Company, 2nd Squad. Get your gear stowed and be back here in 20 minutes. That was it. No acknowledgement of her experience, no questions about her background. Just another name on his list. The barracks were standard military issue. Narrow beds, metal lockers, everything gray and functional. Catherine found her assigned bunk and started unpacking. A couple of younger Marines were already there, sitting on their beds and talking about where they were from. "Hey," one of them said, glancing over at her. "You new too?" "Yeah, just got here this morning," Catherine replied, folding her clothes into the locker. "Cool. I'm Ryan, that's Chris over there. We came in last week." Chris gave a half wave but didn't say much. Both of them looked like they were maybe 20, 21 at most. Good kids probably, but she could already sense the dynamic. They were friendly enough, but there was a hesitation in how they talked to her. Like they weren't quite sure what to make of a woman who was clearly older than the typical recruit. The first briefing happened that afternoon. Everyone gathered in a classroom while Sergeant Collins went over the training schedule, expectations, and rules. Catherine sat near the back, taking notes. She noticed how most of the questions were directed at the male recruits. When Collins asked who had prior first aid training, several hands went up, including hers. But his eyes seemed to skip right over her. "Good," he said, nodding at the guys who'd raised their hands. "We'll be counting on you during field exercises." Catherine put her hand down slowly. "All right then." Message received. The days that followed were a blur of physical training, weapons drills, and classroom instruction. Catherine woke up before dawn every morning, laced up her boots, and pushed herself through whatever the day demanded. The runs were long, the obstacle courses brutal, and the heat unforgiving. But she'd been through worse. Years of hauling equipment up apartment stairs and wrestling combative patients had given her a kind of functional strength that surprised people. Still, the treatment didn't change. During weapons assembly drills, the instructors would hover over the younger guys, offering tips and corrections. When Catherine finished assembling her rifle in record time, the instructor just grunted and moved on. During tactical exercises, she got assigned to communications or supply roles, the kind of positions that kept you at the rear. One evening, after a particularly long day, she was sitting outside the barracks cleaning her rifle when Ryan came over and sat down nearby. "You're pretty good at this stuff," he said, nodding at her weapon. thanks. Had some practice with firearms before I joined. Yeah? What'd you do before this? Paramedic. Worked in LA for about 8 years. Ryan's eyebrows went up. No kidding? That's intense. Why'd you switch? Catherine thought about how to answer that. Felt like I could do more here. Make a bigger impact, you know? He nodded slowly. That's cool. Must be weird, though, starting over when you've already done so much. She smiled at that. Ryan was more perceptive than she'd given him credit for. Yeah, it's definitely an adjustment. But everyone starts somewhere. What she didn't tell him was how frustrating it was to be treated like she knew nothing when she'd been making life-or-death decisions for years. How it felt to watch younger, less experienced Marines get opportunities while she was sidelined. How she sometimes lay awake at night wondering if she'd made a mistake. But complaining wouldn't change anything. She'd learned that a long time ago. The only way forward was to keep showing up, keep performing, keep proving herself one day at a time. During the second week, they had a combat lifesaver course. This was Catherine's chance to shine. The instructor was going over basic trauma care, things she could do in her sleep. When he asked for a volunteer to demonstrate a tourniquet application, she raised her hand. He looked right past her and called on someone else. The guy he picked fumbled with the tourniquet, wrapping it too loose. Catherine bit her tongue. The instructor corrected him, walking him through the steps. Meanwhile, Catherine sat there knowing she could have done it perfectly the first time. After class, she stayed behind to look at the training materials. The instructor was packing up his gear. Excuse me, Catherine said. I noticed the tourniquet training earlier. I have quite a bit of experience with trauma care, and I'd be happy to help with demonstrations if you need volunteers. He glanced at her briefly. We've got it covered, thanks. And that was that. Catherine walked back to the barracks feeling a familiar burn in her chest. It was the same feeling she'd had years ago when ER doctors would dismiss her observations about patients, only to come to the same conclusions hours later. The same feeling she'd had when fire chiefs would assign her to drive instead of letting her run into burning buildings with the guys. She'd overcome it then. She'd overcome it every time. She just had to do it again. That night, while others were relaxing or sleeping, Catherine stayed up studying tactical manuals and medical protocols. She reviewed everything from field fortifications to advanced airway management. If she was going to break through their assumptions, she needed to be undeniably good. Not just competent, excellent. The thing was, Catherine understood why they were skeptical. The military had its ways of doing things, its culture and expectations. She was an outsider trying to find her place, but she also knew something they didn't. She'd already proven herself in situations most of them couldn't imagine. She'd kept people alive when everything was falling apart around her. She'd made impossible decisions with seconds to spare. This was just another test, another wall to climb. And if there was one thing Catherine had learned in her years as a paramedic, it was that you don't give up when things get hard. You push through, you stay focused, and you trust that eventually, people will see what you're really made of. She just had to be patient. Her moment would come. 3 weeks into her time with Delta Company, Catherine had settled into a routine. Wake up at 5, morning run, breakfast, training exercises, more drills, evening study, sleep, repeat. The other Marines had stopped treating her like a complete outsider, but she wasn't exactly one of them either. She existed in this strange middle ground, acknowledged but not quite included. Then the announcement came. Sergeant Collins gathered everyone after morning formation, his expression more serious than usual. Listen up. We've been selected for a joint training exercise next week. This is a big deal. We'll be working alongside some of the best units in the Corps, including a Marine Special Operations team. A ripple of excitement went through the group. This was what they'd been training for. Real scenarios, real pressure, and a chance to show what they could do in front of elite operators. This exercise will simulate a hostile urban environment with multiple objectives, Collins continued. Hostage rescue, building clearing, casualty evacuation. You'll be evaluated on everything from your tactical movement to how you handle stress. The Raiders will be leading the operation, and we'll be providing support. Do not embarrass me, do not embarrass this unit, and most importantly, do not get in their way. Understood? A chorus of "Yes, Sergeant," echoed across the formation. Catherine felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of scenario she needed. A chance to show what she could really do under pressure. The medical aspects alone would play to her strengths, and if she could prove herself here, maybe things would start to change. The next few days were consumed with preparation. They studied maps of the training area, reviewed tactical procedures, and practiced coordinating with other units. Catherine threw herself into every aspect of it, memorizing building layouts and running through emergency medical scenarios in her head. The night before the exercise, she barely slept. Not from nerves, but from anticipation. She knew this feeling. It was the same electric energy she'd felt before big shifts at the hospital. The kind where you knew something intense was coming and you wanted to be ready. The morning of the exercise arrived with clear skies and temperatures that promised to climb. Catherine checked her gear 3 times. Medical supplies, ammunition, radio, water. Everything had its place, everything was accounted for. Around her, the other members of Delta Company were doing the same. Their excitement barely contained. They loaded into trucks and drove to the training site, a mock city that the military used for urban warfare exercises. Concrete buildings, narrow streets, obstacles everywhere. It looked eerily realistic. As they dismounted, Catherine got her first good look at the Marine Raiders. They stood in a group away from the main formation, and everything about them was different. The way they carried themselves, the way they checked their equipment, even the way they communicated with each other. These weren't people playing soldier. These were professionals who'd seen real combat, real consequences. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes and scars visible on her forearms, was going over a map with her team leader. Another, a tall man with a gray beard, was methodically checking magazines and testing his radio. They moved with a quiet confidence that came from experience. The exercise commander, a Major Catherine didn't recognize, called everyone together for the final briefing. He explained the scenario in detail. Enemy combatants had taken over several buildings. Civilians were being held hostage on multiple floors. The mission was to neutralize the threat and extract the hostages with minimal casualties. The raiders would take point, clearing buildings and engaging targets. Delta Company would provide perimeter security, manage casualties, and support the extraction. It was a supporting role, which made sense given their experience level. But Catherine couldn't help feeling disappointed. She wanted to be in the thick of it. As they moved into position, Sergeant Collins started assigning roles. The more experienced guys got tactical positions closer to the action. Catherine, along with 2 other Marines, got assigned to the communications and medical support vehicle at the rear. Mitchell, you're our primary medical. Rodriguez and Chen, your backup communications. Stay with the vehicle unless called forward. Clear? Catherine wanted to argue but knew better. Clear, Sergeant. She watched as the rest of Delta Company moved into their positions, rifles ready, eyes scanning for threats. Meanwhile, she was stuck at the rear with a radio and a medical bag, waiting for something to happen. The exercise began with a radio call. All units, exercise is live. Repeat, exercise is live. The sound of blank rounds echoed through the mock city. Smoke grenades popped, filling streets with gray clouds. Through her binoculars, Catherine could see the raiders moving through buildings with practiced precision. They flowed like water, each person covering angles, communicating with hand signals, moving as one unit. Delta Company, by contrast, was struggling. They bunched up too much, hesitated at corners, and their radio chatter was chaotic. Catherine could hear Sergeant Collins barking corrections over the comm system, but the damage was done. They looked exactly like what they were, inexperienced Marines trying to keep up with professionals. 20 minutes into the exercise, something went wrong. Man down. Man down at Building 3, someone shouted over the radio. Catherine was already moving before anyone gave her permission. She grabbed her medical bag and sprinted toward Building 3, her training taking over. Behind her, she could hear Rodriguez calling after her, but she didn't stop. She found him near the entrance. Private Chen, one of the younger guys from her unit. He'd been running between positions when his foot caught in a drainage grate. His ankle was bent at a wrong angle, already swelling. Chen's face was pale, sweat pouring down his temples. I'm sorry. I messed up. Stop talking and let me look, Catherine said, kneeling beside him. Her hands moved quickly, feeling the ankle, checking for fractures. Definitely a bad sprain, possibly broken. Can you wiggle your toes? He tried, winced. Yeah. Burns, though. Good sign. Means the nerves are intact. She pulled out an inflatable splint from her bag and started immobilizing the ankle. You're going to be fine. Stupid place to put a grate, honestly. Despite his pain, Chen almost smiled. Thanks, Doc. Catherine called for extraction, and within minutes, a training medic arrived with a stretcher. They loaded Chen up and carried him off. The whole thing took maybe 5 minutes, but when Catherine looked up, she realized the exercise had continued without her. Everyone was too focused on their objectives to notice one medic doing her job. She jogged back toward her assigned position, but something made her pause. There was smoke coming from Building 5. Not the theatrical smoke from grenades, but dark, thick smoke that looked wrong. Very wrong, her radio crackled. All units, we have a code red at Building 5. Electrical fire, real emergency. All exercise personnel evacuate immediately. For a split second, everyone froze. Then chaos erupted. We've got people in there, someone shouted. Third floor? Catherine's training kicked in before her brain caught up. She'd been in burning buildings before, had pulled people from wrecked cars filled with smoke. This was different, but the principles were the same. Get in. Get them out. Don't hesitate. She saw a breathing apparatus near the safety equipment station. Grabbed it. Someone tried to stop her, maybe Sergeant Collins, maybe someone else, but she was already running. The building entrance was thick with smoke. Catherine pulled on the breathing mask, checked the straps, and pushed through the door. The heat hit her immediately like opening an oven, but she'd felt worse. That apartment fire in North Hollywood had been worse. She stayed low, feeling along the wall, counting her steps. The stairs were to the left based on the building layout they'd studied. She found them, started climbing. The smoke was getting thicker, darker. Somewhere above her she could hear voices. Panicked voices. Second floor. The smoke was so thick now she could barely see her own hands. She kept one hand on the wall, kept moving forward. Her breathing was loud inside the mask, rhythmic and steady, just like they'd taught her in paramedic school. Control your breathing, control your panic. Third floor. She found them huddled near a window. 3 Marines from Delta Company, coughing and disoriented. Their eyes were red, streaming tears from the smoke. Listen to me, Catherine shouted, her voice muffled by the mask. Stay low and follow me. Don't stand up, don't run. Follow my voice. She grabbed the closest one, a kid named Phillips, and pulled him down to floor level. Crawl, move. They followed her back toward the stairs, but the main stairwell was completely engulfed now. Catherine's mind raced. There had been a secondary exit in the briefing materials, a back staircase that led to the ground floor. Most people had probably ignored that detail. She hadn't. This way. She led them down a corridor, feeling for the door she knew was there. Found it, pushed through. The back stairs were clearer, less smoke. They stumbled down together, Catherine counting heads, making sure no one fell behind. When they burst out a side exit, fresh air hit them like a blessing. The 3 Marines collapsed on the ground, coughing and gasping. Catherine pulled off her mask and did quick assessments. Look at me, can you breathe? Any chest pain? They were okay. Shaken, smoke-stained, but okay. There's more inside, one of them managed to say between coughs. The Raiders, 3rd floor. Catherine's blood went cold. She looked back at the building, at the smoke pouring from windows. Somewhere in there, the elite operators were trapped. Without thinking, she pulled the breathing mask back on and ran toward the building again. Someone grabbed her arm. You can't go back in there. She yanked free and kept running. Because that's what you did. That's what she'd always done. When everyone else was running away, you ran toward the problem. The smoke inside was worse than before. Catherine could feel the heat intensifying, could hear the crackle of flames somewhere deeper in the building. Her heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. Years of emergency response had taught her to separate fear from action. You could be terrified and still do the job. In fact, most of the time that's exactly what it took. She made it back to the 3rd floor, calling out as she moved through the corridor. Anyone here? Call out if you can hear me! For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of fire and her own breathing inside the mask. Then faint but distinct a voice. Here, northeast corner! Catherine followed the sound, crawling through smoke so thick it was like moving through a solid wall. Her training had prepared her for this, but training never quite captured the real weight of it. The way your lungs started to burn even with the mask on. The way the heat made your skin feel like it was shrinking. The way every instinct screamed at you to turn back. She found them in what looked like it had been a training office. 2 Raiders, both men. One slumped against the wall unconscious, the other trying desperately to drag his teammate toward an exit that was blocked by debris. The conscious one had shed his helmet, his face covered in soot, eyes watering. "He's not breathing right," the raider gasped out when he saw Catherine. "Smoke inhalation, I think. I can't get him up." Catherine moved to the unconscious Marine immediately, checking his airway. His breathing was shallow, raspy. Classic signs of smoke inhalation. She'd seen it dozens of times. His lungs were fighting for oxygen that wasn't there. "What's his name?" Catherine asked, already pulling out her medical supplies. "Reyes. Master Sergeant Reyes." "Okay, Reyes, stay with me," Catherine muttered, even though he couldn't hear her. She positioned his head to open the airway better, checked his pulse. Rapid but present. Good. That meant his heart was still fighting. She looked at the other raider. "Can you walk?" "Yeah, I'm okay." "Good. I need you to help me carry him. There's a secondary exit down the hall, backstairs. Can you make it?" The raider nodded, and together they got Reyes between them. The man was solid muscle, dead weight in their arms. Catherine took the front, guiding them through the smoke-filled corridor. She counted steps in her head, using the building layout from memory. 10 steps forward. Turn left. Another 15 steps to the door. The smoke was playing tricks on her vision. Everything looked the same. Everything was gray and black and suffocating. But she trusted her count, trusted her training. When her hand hit the doorframe, relief flooded through her. "Almost there, keep moving." They got Reyes down the stairs, the other raider stumbling but pushing through. When they finally burst out into daylight, firefighters and medical personnel rushed forward. Catherine helped lower Reyes to the ground and immediately started giving the emergency responders information. Smoke inhalation, possible carbon monoxide poisoning. Breathing is shallow, pulse is rapid. He's been unconscious for at least 3 minutes. The EMTs took over, getting oxygen on Reyes, checking his vitals. Catherine stepped back, pulling off her breathing mask, her whole body shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She bent over, hands on her knees, coughing hard. Someone handed her a water bottle. She looked up to thank them and found herself staring at the other raider she'd helped. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Shock, maybe, or recognition. "You okay?" Catherine asked between coughs. He didn't answer right away, just kept staring at her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Then he grabbed his radio with shaking hands and pressed the transmit button. His voice boomed across the training ground, loud enough that people all over the area must have heard it. "Iron Wolf, stand by! I repeat, Iron Wolf, stand by!" The reaction was immediate and electric. Every Marine within earshot stopped what they were doing. Heads turned. People started moving toward them. Catherine saw Sergeant Collins freeze mid-step, his face going through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. The raider was still staring at her. "Doc Mitchell? Catherine Mitchell?" Her breath caught. Nobody here knew that call sign. Nobody here knew about Fallujah. She'd left that part of her life behind when she'd gotten out 5 years ago. She'd been a civilian paramedic, anonymous, just another person doing a job. That's how she'd wanted it. "How do you know that name?" Catherine asked quietly. "Because you saved my life." His voice cracked. "Fallujah, 2019. You pulled me and 3 other guys out of a burning vehicle while insurgents were shooting at us. You held them off while treating our wounds. You coordinated our extraction when everyone else thought we were dead." Catherine's mind flashed back. That city had been hell. The convoy ambush, the explosions, the screaming. She'd been part of a combat medical team, and when the attack happened, she'd done what needed to be done. Had she saved people? Yes. But she'd also lost people. Had seen things that still woke her up at night sometimes. "That was a long time ago," she said. "That was yesterday for me," he shot back. "Every single day I'm alive is because of you." By now a crowd had gathered. Sergeant Collins pushed through, his face pale. "Mitchell, what's he talking about?" Before Catherine could answer, someone else arrived. A master sergeant with silver hair and sharp eyes, someone who clearly had authority. He looked at Catherine, then at the raider who'd called out, then back at Catherine. "Is it really her?" he asked. "Yes, sir. It's Iron Wolf." The master sergeant stepped forward and did something Catherine never expected. He saluted. Not the casual salute you gave in passing, but a full, formal salute that meant respect. Real respect. We thought you left the service completely, he said. Catherine returned the salute automatically. I did, sir, for 5 years. Worked as a civilian paramedic in Los Angeles. And now you're back as a private? Starting from scratch? Yes, sir. Someone in the crowd had pulled out a tablet and was frantically searching military databases. A moment later, he turned the screen around so others could see. Catherine saw her own face staring back at her, younger, covered in desert dust and blood. Her uniform from back then. And there, listed below the photo, her medals and commendations. Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism. Purple Heart. Combat Action Ribbon. The list went on. Sergeant Collins looked like he might pass out. Why didn't you tell us? Why let us treat you like you didn't know anything? Catherine took a long drink of water before answering. Around her, more Marines were gathering, including the guys from Delta Company she'd pulled from the building earlier. They looked stunned. Because respect isn't something you can just claim, Catherine said finally. I've been out for 5 years. These Marines don't know me. They have no reason to trust me based on what I did in the past. I needed to prove I could still do the job, that I hadn't lost my edge. She looked at her unit, at all the young faces that had dismissed her as just another rookie. And you all needed to learn something too. You needed to see what happens when you make assumptions about people based on what they look like or how old they are. Every single person you meet has a story. They have skills and experiences you don't know about. If you judge them before you give them a chance, you might miss out on someone who could save your life someday. The silence that followed was heavy. Ryan, the young Marine who'd been friendly to her from the start, spoke up. We messed up. We all messed up. You're learning, Catherine said. That's what this time is for. Making mistakes while the consequences aren't real. Master Sergeant Reyes was sitting up now, oxygen mask on his face, but he was conscious and alert. He pulled the mask down. This woman, he said, his voice hoarse but strong, is one of the finest Marines I've ever served with. In Fallujah, when everything went wrong, she was the one constant we could count on. She ran into fire when everyone else was running out. She made impossible decisions and saved dozens of lives. Sergeant Collins stepped forward, his usual gruff demeanor completely gone. Corporal Mitchell, I owe you an apology. We all do. We should have asked about your background. We should have given you a fair chance. Catherine shook her head. No apology needed, Sergeant. You treated me exactly how you'd treat any new recruit. That's fair. What matters is what we do moving forward. But she could see it in their eyes now. Everything had changed. The way they looked at her. The way they stood, even the way they breathed. She wasn't the rookie anymore. She was Iron Wolf, a legend they'd never known was walking among them. And Catherine wasn't entirely sure how she felt about that. The day after the training exercise, Catherine woke up to find everything different. Word had spread through Camp Pendleton faster than fire through dry brush. The story had grown with each retelling, too. By the time she got to the mess hall for breakfast, Marines she'd never met were nodding at her respectfully. Some even stood up as she passed. It made her uncomfortable. She grabbed her tray and found a seat in the corner, hoping to eat in peace. That lasted about 30 seconds before Ryan and 2 other guys from Delta Company approached her table. Mind if we sit? Ryan asked. Catherine gestured to the empty seats. They sat down, and for a moment nobody said anything. They just pushed food around their plates, clearly working up to something. Finally, one of them spoke up. His name was Phillips, the same guy she'd led out of the burning building. I wanted to say thank you. And I'm sorry. I was one of the guys who made jokes when you first arrived. I didn't take you seriously. I remember, Catherine said. Phillips winced. Yeah, I figured you did. Anyway, I was wrong. And I'm sorry. Me too, Ryan added. I tried to be friendly, but I didn't really respect what you might bring to the team. I just saw someone older trying to start over and thought you couldn't hack it. The third Marine, a quiet guy named Lopez, just nodded. Same. Catherine set down her fork. Look, I appreciate the apologies, but here's the thing. You didn't know me. You made assumptions based on limited information, which is human nature. What matters is that you're willing to learn from it. The question is, are you? Yes, they said in unison. Good, because I'm not here to be put on a pedestal. I'm here to do a job, same as you. I've got experience you don't have, sure, but you've got youth and energy that I'm having to work harder to match. We all bring something different to the table. That's what makes a unit strong. Over the following days, the dynamics in Delta Company shifted dramatically. Suddenly, everyone wanted to train with Catherine. During medical drills, they actually listened when she offered suggestions. During tactical exercises, Sergeant Collins started asking for her input on positioning and strategy. But it wasn't all positive. Some Marines started treating her like she was fragile, like she was too important to risk. During a live-fire exercise, one of the squad leaders tried to keep her at the rear despite her protests. With all due respect, Corporal Mitchell, we can't risk losing someone with your experience. Catherine pulled him aside after the exercise. Listen to me carefully. If you treat me different from everyone else, if you try to protect me or keep me out of situations because of my past, then we've got a problem. I came back to serve, not to be a mascot. Either I'm a Marine like everyone else or I'm not. Which is it? He looked uncomfortable but nodded. You're right. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just treat me like you'd treat any other competent member of this unit. Word of that conversation spread too. People started to understand that Catherine didn't want special treatment. She wanted to be part of the team, to pull her weight and then some. Slowly, the excessive deference started to fade, replaced by something better, real respect. The kind based on capability, not legend. About 2 weeks after the exercise, Master Sergeant Reyes showed up at Delta Company's training area. He was walking fine now, fully recovered from the smoke inhalation. He found Catherine during a break and asked if they could talk privately. They walked to a quiet spot near the training building. Reyes looked at her for a long moment before speaking. The Raiders need people like you. People with real combat experience, medical expertise, and the kind of judgment that only comes from being tested under fire. I'd like you to consider putting in a package for special operations. Catherine had been expecting this. It was the logical next step. Special operations was where the best of the best went. Better equipment, more challenging missions, higher purpose. 5 years ago, she would have jumped at the opportunity. I appreciate the offer, Master Sergeant. I really do. But I need to decline. Reyes looked surprised. Can I ask why? Catherine gestured back toward where Delta Company was training. See those Marines? Most of them are kids, really. Fresh out of high school, full of confidence but light on wisdom. A month ago, they were judging people based on age and gender without even realizing they were doing it. They were making assumptions that could get people killed in real combat. And now? Reyes asked. Now they're learning. They're questioning their assumptions. They're starting to see that everyone has value, that experience comes in different forms, and that the most dangerous thing on a battlefield isn't the enemy. It's prejudice and ignorance among your own ranks. Reyes nodded slowly. You think you can make more of a difference here than with the Raiders? I know I can. The Raiders are already elite. They've already learned these lessons, most of them the hard way. But these young Marines, they're still forming who they're going to be as leaders. If I can help shape them into people who judge others by their character and capabilities instead of surface-level stuff, then that ripples out. They'll lead other Marines someday. They'll make decisions that affect people's lives. I want to be part of building that foundation. That's a pretty selfless choice, Reyes said. Catherine smiled. It's a selfish choice, actually. I tried the elite operator path. I've been there, done that, got the medals. What I haven't done is help build the next generation. That feels like unfinished business. Reyes extended his hand. Well, if you ever change your mind, the offer stands. They shook hands, and Reyes left. Catherine stood there for a moment watching her unit train. She could see the difference already. They moved with more confidence but less arrogance. They communicated better. They looked out for each other. That afternoon, Sergeant Collins pulled her aside. The base commander wants to see you tomorrow morning. You're getting a formal commendation for your actions during the exercise. Thought you should know, Catherine groaned. Is that necessary? Collins actually smiled, something she'd rarely seen from him. Afraid so. You saved lives, Mitchell. Real lives, not training scenarios. That gets recognized whether you want it or not. The ceremony the next day was mercifully brief. The base commander presented her with a certificate and said some nice words about courage and quick thinking. There were photos taken that Catherine knew would end up on some public affairs website. The whole thing made her squirm. But afterward, something unexpected happened. Young Marines started approaching her with questions. Real questions about tactics, about handling fear, about making decisions under pressure. They weren't treating her like a celebrity anymore. They were treating her like a mentor. One evening, a female Marine from another company found Catherine in the gym. She couldn't have been more than 19 and she looked nervous. "Corporal Mitchell, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" The young woman hesitated. "I'm one of only 3 women in my unit. The guys aren't mean or anything, but they don't really see me. They don't take me seriously. I heard about what happened with you and I just wondered if you had any advice." Catherine set down the weights she'd been using and gave the Marine her full attention. "What's your name?" "Private Chen. Victoria Chen." "Okay, Victoria. Here's what I learned. You can't control what other people think about you, especially at first. What you can control is your performance and your consistency. Show up every day and be excellent. Not good, excellent. Don't make excuses. Don't ask for special treatment. Just be undeniably competent at everything you do." "That's it?" Victoria sounded skeptical. "No, there's more. While you're being excellent, also be humble. Help others. Share what you know. Don't be the person who succeeds by stepping on others. Be the person who lifts the whole unit up. Eventually, people will notice. It might take longer than it should, and that's not fair, but it works." Victoria nodded slowly. "What if it doesn't work? What if they never see me as equal? Then you've got a decision to make. You can let their limitations define you, or you can prove them wrong and move on to a unit that deserves you. But don't give up before you've given them a real chance to surprise you. People can learn. People can change. I've seen it happen." They talked for another 20 minutes, Catherine sharing stories from her own experiences navigating male-dominated spaces. When Victoria finally left, she looked more determined than defeated. These were the moments Catherine valued most. Not the medals or the recognition, but the quiet conversations where she could help someone else avoid the pitfalls she'd encountered, where she could pass on hard-won wisdom and maybe make their path a little easier. Back in the barracks that night, Catherine found a note on her bunk. It was from Ryan and several others in Delta Company. They wanted to set up regular training sessions where she could teach them advanced combat life-saving techniques. They called it Iron Wolf School, which made Catherine roll her eyes, but she appreciated the gesture. She wrote back with one condition. They had to stop calling it that. 6 months after the training exercise, Delta Company had transformed into something nobody would have predicted. They topped their combat readiness evaluation, earning the highest marks of any unit in their battalion. But more importantly, they'd developed a reputation for something else. They were known as the company that gave everyone a fair shot. It started small. When new recruits joined, the established members didn't make assumptions. They didn't judge people by their appearance or background. Instead, they observed, they asked questions, they gave people chances to prove themselves. It seemed like such a simple change, but it made all the difference. Catherine watched this evolution with quiet pride. She hadn't set out to change the culture of an entire company. She'd just wanted to do her job and be respected for her capabilities. But sometimes impact happens whether you plan for it or not. One morning, Sergeant Collins called her into his office. He looked more serious than usual, which was saying something. "Mitchell, I need to show you something." He turned his computer screen around. It was an after-action report from the training exercise, the one that had changed everything. "I'm submitting this to battalion. It details what happened, including your actions. But more importantly, it talks about what we learned as a unit." Catherine read through it. Collins had written about the assumptions they'd made, the opportunities they'd missed, and the transformation that had followed. He didn't pull punches about their initial failures. He laid it all out honestly. "This is going to make us look bad," Catherine pointed out. "It's going to make us look honest," Collins corrected, "and it's going to help other units avoid the same mistakes. That's worth more than protecting our ego." He paused, then added, "I also want you to know that I recommended you for promotion. You've earned it 10 times over. The paperwork is already moving up the chain." Catherine wasn't sure what to say. A promotion would mean more resp. Responsibility, possibly a different assignment. What if I want to stay with Delta Company? Then you'll stay with Delta Company as their new squad leader. Collins smiled slightly. You didn't think I'd let you go that easily, did you? Over the next few weeks, Catherine took on more leadership responsibilities. She led training exercises, mentored junior Marines, and worked with Collins on unit development. The role suited her. She'd always been a teacher at heart, even back in her paramedic days. One afternoon, she was running a medical training session when a visitor showed up. Master Sergeant Reyes, along with 2 other raiders. They watched from the back as Catherine walked the Marines through a complex trauma scenario. What you're looking for are the subtle signs, Catherine explained. Patient seems stable, but their breathing is getting shallow. Pulse is quickening even though they're lying down. What does that tell you? Internal bleeding, one of the Marines answered. Exactly. And what do you do? They worked through the scenario, Catherine pushing them to think critically, to notice details, to make decisions under pressure. When the session ended, the Marines filed out and Reyes approached. You're good at this, he said. Thanks. What brings you by? Curiosity, mainly. Wanted to see what you were building here. He gestured to where the Marines had been. They're lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have them, Catherine replied. They keep me sharp. Keep me honest, Reyes nodded. The offer still stands, you know. Special operations, but I get why you're staying. Some missions are about direct action. Others are about building capacity. Both matter. After he left, Catherine thought about that phrase. Building capacity. That's exactly what she was doing. Creating Marines who would go on to lead others, who would make better decisions because they'd learned to question their assumptions and value every member of their team. The promotion came through in early spring. Corporal Mitchell became Sergeant Mitchell, and with it came the formal leadership of 2nd Squad. Her first act was to establish a new tradition. Every Friday afternoon, the squad would gather for what she called open discussion. No rank, no hierarchy, just honest conversation about challenges they were facing and lessons they were learning. The first session was awkward. Nobody knew quite how to talk to a superior officer without the usual formality. But Catherine set the tone by being vulnerable first. I'll start, she said. This week I struggled with patience. I got frustrated with a Marine who wasn't picking up a tactical concept as quickly as I thought he should. Instead of finding a better way to explain it, I just repeated the same explanation louder. That was my failure, not his. I need to remember that people learn differently, and my job is to adapt to them, not force them to adapt to me. The honesty opened the floodgates. Others started sharing their own struggles and mistakes. They talked about fear, about doubt, about the gap between who they wanted to be and who they were. It was raw and real in a way military culture didn't always allow. These sessions became the foundation of something special. 2nd Squad developed a bond that went beyond professional respect. They trusted each other because they'd seen each other's weaknesses and chose to support rather than judge. During a major field exercise that summer, that trust paid off. The scenario involved a complex urban operation with multiple objectives. 2nd Squad moved through it with a fluidity that impressed the evaluators. They communicated efficiently, covered each other's sectors without being told, and adapted to changing circumstances on the fly. When they got ambushed during the exercise, a surprise element the evaluators had added, they didn't panic. They fell into a defensive posture, treated simulated casualties, and called for support exactly according to protocol. The evaluators later said it was textbook perfect, but Catherine knew the truth. It wasn't textbook anything. It was the result of dozens of training sessions, hundreds of conversations, and a culture that valued every person's contribution. They performed well because they trusted each other completely. One evening, Catherine was walking back from the training area when she saw Victoria Chen, the young Marine who'd asked her for advice months ago. Victoria was now leading a small group through a tactical drill, and she was doing it with confidence and clarity. Victoria noticed Catherine watching and jogged over. Hey, Sergeant Mitchell. Hey, yourself. You looked good out there. Thanks. I've been working on being more assertive with my squad. It's still hard sometimes, but it's getting easier. That's all you can ask for. Incremental improvement. Victoria hesitated, then said, I heard you turned down special operations. People say you're crazy for that. Catherine smiled. People say a lot of things, but I know what matters to me. Making a difference where I am, with the people around me. That's not crazy. That's purposeful. I think I get it, Victoria said. Thanks for being an example. It helps more than you know. As Victoria rejoined her squad, Catherine realized something. The legend of Iron Wolf would fade eventually. New heroes would emerge, new stories would be told. But the lessons she was teaching, the culture she was helping to build, that would outlast any reputation. That night, Catherine sat in her quarters and wrote in a journal she'd been keeping since returning to service. She wrote about the journey from being dismissed as a rookie to becoming a respected leader. But more importantly, she wrote about the Marines she'd had the privilege to serve with and train. She wrote about Ryan, who'd grown from a friendly but uncertain kid into a confident team leader. About Phillips, who'd overcome his prejudices and become one of the best tactical thinkers in the company. About Lopez, the quiet one, who'd found his voice and now mentored newer Marines with patience and wisdom. These were her victories. Not the medals or the recognition, but the growth she'd witnessed and helped facilitate. Every Marine who learned to see past stereotypes, every leader who valued substance over assumptions, every young person who felt empowered to be their authentic self. Those were the wins that mattered. Delta Company wasn't perfect. They still made mistakes, still had setbacks, but they approached challenges differently now. With humility, with openness, with a genuine belief that everyone had something valuable to contribute. And Catherine? She'd found her place. Not at the tip of the spear with special operations, not seeking glory or advancement, but right here, teaching, mentoring, leading by example, showing that true strength wasn't about being the toughest or the most decorated. It was about lifting others up, about using your experience to make those around you better. The call sign Iron Wolf would always be part of her story. But it didn't define her anymore. She was Sergeant Catherine Mitchell, squad leader of 2nd Squad Delta Company, and that was exactly who she was meant to be. Years from now, the Marines she'd trained would go on to lead their own units. They'd carry with them the lessons about respect, about giving people chances, about looking past surface judgments to see the person underneath. They'd pass those lessons to the next generation who'd pass them to the next. That was the real legacy, not what she'd done in Fallujah, as important as that had been, but what she was doing now every single day in the quiet work of building better leaders and a stronger core. Catherine closed her journal and looked out the window at Camp Pendleton. Marines were everywhere, training, laughing, pushing themselves to be better. Among them were the people she'd helped shape, who were now shaping others in turn. She smiled. This was the mission she'd been searching for, and she was exactly where she needed to be.